Yeah, well, I was honored and privileged to be one of the first speakers here at Purpose on Tap, and have had the benefit of looking over the last 3 years of how they've progressed. And what stands out the most to me is that Purpose on Tap is really meeting a need out there, that these young 20, 30, 40-year-old guys are isolated. They don't have a community that they can connect with. And this is creating an environment where they can come together. And we always like to joke, we don't care if they come for the beer or the networking or the speakers, and they've had some very noteworthy speakers. People need it more than ever to hear this message of community and unity and just what does it mean to be a young man and find your purpose in Christ.
So Purpose on Tap has radically changed my community. I mean, when I moved to Atlanta in 2015, I kind of found myself struggling to find community, and I came in and I met these guys, and I've been coming consistently. And since I've been coming consistently, I mean, my best friends are out there. It's an open environment where guys can come in and get to know others like them. They see people like them. They have people in the same industry, same careers. And like I said, you talk about relevant subjects to today. You talk about things like loneliness that people are dealing with. You talk about your job. You talk about things coming up in your life, girls and all that kind of stuff. And when you're able to go deeper with people, I think that you develop a sense of camaraderie with them. Anybody that would come into Purpose on Tap, whether you're a Christian or whether you're not, you're still going to have the ability to make and build these amazing relationships with other guys.
Our purpose at Monday Night Brewing is deepening human relationships over some of the best beer in the country. We actually got started brewing beer because it was a group of guys in a Friday morning Bible study, and we were looking for a way to casually hang out and build relationships with each other. We didn't know each other that well, and so we started brewing beer on one Monday night 15 years ago. We would have anywhere between 30 and 80 people show up on a Monday night, and what we saw was that there was just something great about having a third space where you can come. There's not a game on TV. there's not all of these distractions. It's just people kind of being with each other and enjoying a beer and enjoying the conversation. And my favorite thing about that too is also just seeing people from all different walks of life show up in the garage as we did that. And there's few places more and more where that can happen, where you can have real intentional just relationship with other people. Knowing some of the guys who are doing Purpose on Tap, they seem to have a vision for really just creating a space where guys can come in and they can enjoy the beers, but also have intentional, meaningful conversation with other people and hear something of relevance and meaning. I think there's, again, so many times where we are, there's so much noise out there. There's so many voices that are just screaming, hey, do this, do that, follow this plan. And this is a time for people to come and hear about purpose, hear about the questions that you're struggling with.
I'm on the session, and I'm an elder at one of the biggest denominational churches in Atlanta, and Purpose on Tap came up in our session meeting last night, talking about how they are attracting young men and because they're creating environments that churches can't create. And I think that's really what happens is the ability to reach people is not inside the walls of a church, it's outside of that. And again, this was kind of birthed in there because two of the founders worked in the men's group or were leaders in the men's group that started there and then came here. So I just see this as an endless opportunity to reach people of all races and nationalities across the country to come and hear stories and learn what it means to have a community around like-minded people. And I don't know of a lot of other places that are out there doing anything like this, and I don't think it can be replicated inside a church because half the guys that show up here would not show up at church.
I'm thankful that there are people bringing groups of guys together to have intentional, meaningful conversation about topics that matter, and I think that's really what Purpose on Tap. To me, it seems like that's their goal and mission and what they're trying to do here in Atlanta.
Purpose on Tap can change Atlanta.
really thrilled for the guys that are here to join us this evening. To start it off, I'm just going to ask each of them to give a brief intro on themselves, just so we each know who we're hearing from. So Steve, will you kick us off, please?
Sure. Steve Cesari. I'm the old guy, or on his notes as they have it, old as dirt. Yeah, my son Matthew and Calder and a couple other guys helped found this and put it together. And I've spent most of my life as an entrepreneur. I'm married to my wife Indy. I've got 4 kids. I got 3 grandkids and a 4th one on the way. And I helped start a men's ministry at Peachtree called Iron Men almost 23 years ago. And I just have a passion for really helping men get real clear on what they want to do on a personal and professional level. I wrote a book called Clarity, How to Get It, How to Keep It, and How to Use It to Balance Your Life. So I've dedicated and committed my life to really helping people not just make money, but make a difference.
Connor Beecham. I know most of you guys. What's up? How y'all doing? So I grew up in Alpharetta. I went to Kings Ridge Christian School up there. Once I graduated from Kings Ridge, I went to Samford University. I know we got some Samford guys. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. So I went to Samford, played football there for 3 years. Career-ending shoulder injury forced me to transfer to Georgia, where I graduated. So go Dogs. That's right, Corwin. So graduated from Georgia in 2015. Started this company called Unum. They do employee benefits. I did sales consulting work with them. Did it for 3 years. It sucked for 3 years. I can talk more about that later probably. But then in May of 2018, my dad and I actually rebranded and restarted a company that he started in '95, which is Hometown Mortgage. So we're on the residential mortgage brokerage side. So I go to Passion City Church in Midtown, Buckhead, Lindbergh area. And yeah, I've been a part of Purpose on Tap since the beginning, so I'm pumped to be here.
Guys, my name is Joel Iverson. I actually moved. I grew up overseas in Japan and went to school up in Virginia. And then my first boss after graduating college was this guy right here, Steve Cesari. So I learned a few things from him. But I kind of always had an entrepreneurial bent, and took a ton away from my time with him, and then eventually about 8 years ago with a few guys started this brewery after having kind of done a whole bunch of stuff before that. And I now live about a mile from here. I have 5 boys between the ages of 9 and 3 months. There's a lot of violence in my house.
That's insane.
Thanks, Joel. So, how do you guys, so today is the 3rd year anniversary of us launching Purpose on Tap. Out of curiosity, who was here 3 years ago today? Can we get a raise of hands? A few people? Yeah, it was right after the Falcons lost the Super Bowl. Fun fact. And Steve was our first speaker, so if you were here that first time, find us later and we'll give you a free beer. As we kick into tonight, we wanted to start with Joel. So I'm sure a lot of you guys participated. We had a great turnout on the survey that we sent out a month ago. And out of the top things that guys said they wanted to hear theme-wise in 2020, it was family, faith, and career. And those are kind of big 3 pillars. So my question to Joel is, out of all of that, you've started a brewery, which, thank you for having us here. This is great. You said 5. Yeah. You said 5. If you had not said that, I was going to say 17 children, but 5 is close. And your wife is also a high accelerator in her career. So how do you manage your family, your faith, and your career, and how do you be intentional about it?
So I've got 5 steps to managing all of those perfectly. I'm just kidding. I think it is. I feel like there's so much out there that tells you that there's just sort of these life hacks, right? That if you just get a really good system, and if you just kind of put the right things in place, you can do it all, and you can succeed in all.
And the reality, I think, from my perspective, is that one, you're not going to crush it at all of them, and you're going to fail. But in that process, the hope, at least for me, is that my faith and sort of the life of Jesus was one that was one of brokenness and weakness, and that carried in that brokenness and weakness and kind of the Beatitudes and what he said, so much that it changes the way you do everything else. It changes the way you do your life, your family, your kids, and just for me, that's kind of been the thing that sort of frees up everything. With my kids, I'll tell a quick story. I think so much of what I end up doing, I bring it home and I share it with my kids, and whether it's struggles at work, whether it's something really hard that's going on in the family, whether it's all of that stuff. And what I see is that your kids actually want to engage on that, and they don't want to see a dad who's perfect and who's got it all together and who's sort of saying, "Hey, I'm this strong, perfect guy." And I asked my son tonight. I said, "Oliver, what do you think? This is kind of the topic. What do you think?" He said, "Dad, I see that you make mistakes and you fail, but I also see that you point back to truth." And I was like, "All right, if that's what he's saying, then I can live with that. I can live with my weaknesses." There's a story, but there's also so much there. I'll share a quick story. I was last year we're trying to open a brew pub over in Birmingham. We needed to get a law change to be able to open there, and it sort of got to this point where I was having to go over every single day to Montgomery to try to get this law changed, and another brewery in Alabama who had sort of said that they were kind of in support of this turned their back on us at the last minute because they didn't want us to open, and then it led to sort of this situation where we had this upper hand, and we were about to drop this bill, and we were in this place, and the guy that was helping us do all this, he calls me. I'm there with my 4 boys, like feeding them dinner at the time, and he's like yelling, dropping all these like F-bombs on the phone, and my son's kind of here. They're like, "Dad, that guy was really, really mad." And he's basically saying, like, this guy who's been in politics for like 40 years, and he's like they crossed a line, and he's like, "They are going in my black book, and they will be forever punished for this," and like he's like, "We are going to crush them," and like this is on, and I'm like, yeah, that's what we're gonna do, because he's like, that's what you do in politics. If someone crosses you, that's what you do. And I hang up the phone, and my kids are like, "Dad, what is this? What's going on?" And I tell them, well, these guys, they kind of turned on us, and they're trying to mess us up, and so we're gonna go, and we're gonna crush them. And my 8-year-old Oliver, he's like, "Dad, but aren't you supposed to love your enemies?" And I'm like, oh, right, come on! And so I get in the car the next morning to drive 2.5 hours to Montgomery, and I'm just thinking, I'm like, man, why my freaking 8-year-old have to call me on the carpet for this? And I'm driving, and I'm thinking, and I'm praying, and I'm like, all right, like, God, what am I supposed to do here? And out of the blue, I get a call from this other guy, an older gentleman who runs a sort of rural brewery, and he's like, "Joel, man, like, I don't like all the way this is going." He's like, can you just take these, you're gonna be sitting there with this guy in power, and can you take these 2 little things and just squeeze them into your bill, and I think this will, like, it'll help us, I can ease things over on my side, and like, it'll be a win for everybody. And I was like, yeah, that's it. That's exactly and this will help this person who's been trying to spite you. It'll be a huge tax break for them, and it'll help them. But he's like, "Can you do that?" I'm like, "Yeah, I can, absolutely." And I go and I tell our guy helping us get this done, and he's like, "That's a terrible idea." And I'm like, "No, we're gonna do it." and we sit down with like the Speaker of the House, and he's like, "Well," end up kind of sharing with him, like, "Hey, can we do these other 2 things?" And he's like, "Yeah, let's do that." He's like, "That's a great idea. Let's make that happen." And it was one of those moments where, and it doesn't always end like a fairy tale like that, where your 8-year-old gives you some advice and these things fall into place. But it is like, if that hadn't happened from my 8-year-old turning and telling me that, and honestly, if it hadn't been him hopefully hearing that truth all along before that, where it meant something to him, that turn of events would not have happened. And I think that, that's my quick summary is there's no perfect way to pack all of it together, but if you can bring it to everything you're in my stage of life, it's pretty fun actually. It's crazy with kids, but it's pretty fun to let them just sort of see all of that, whether it's the ups and downs from work and everything you go through. So.
Awesome, thanks. So I was gonna go to Connor, but in what you said at the end, then you want to go to Steve because it dovetails right into it. So my question to Steve, and he's going to give some background on it, but there's a handful of years ago in his business where a company, Costco, who I'm a huge fan of, they had to, or they were doing some shady business on how they were trying to sell one of his products. And he ended up taking the high road on trying to right the wrong, and it financially set him and his company back. So Steve, will you walk us through A, what you were doing, and B, why you ended up taking the higher road on that?
Absolutely. Oh, sorry, I'm tapping. Sorry.
Absolutely. First of all, I think we should give a big hand to Joel for having 5 boys and being able to come out tonight. We're glad you're here, and thank you for sharing. So I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, and in 1989, my brother and I started a company called Trillium Health Products. We marketed a product called the Juice Man Juicer before anybody knew what juicing was, and literally grew the business from 0 to almost 100 million in revenue in 3.5 years. We were literally written up in Inc. magazine as one of the fastest growing privately held companies in the United States in 1992. And through that process, I was surrounded by a group of guys out there through an organization called Pro Athletes Outreach that worked with pro athletes and their families, and their mission was to equip athletes and their family to be a positive impact for Jesus Christ at home, at work, and in the community. And I was exposed and really growing and learning about what it meant to have a personal relationship with Christ, and being mentored by men that were pouring into me and teaching me how to utilize my faith at work. And so I started to implement some of those things around the office, praying with people. I'd have my Bible on my desk, and it started to rub some people the wrong way. But I stuck with it, and in 1992, we went from the fastest growing company in the United States by Inc. magazine standards to one of the fastest shrinking companies in the United States, and literally had to start laying off some of the 250 people that were working with us. And literally because of how well we marketed the product, we attracted a lot of other competitors to come in, and it created a glut in the marketplace. And we had a distributor who bought like $15 million worth of juicers from us to sell them to places like Macy's and Bon Marché and Rich's and all these department stores around the country. And when there was a slowdown in the juicing because of the glut in the marketplace, literally the sales stopped at the department stores, and all the department stores started calling up the distributor called me, and I told them, look, you don't have to worry, I'm not going to dump goods in off-retail places. I will protect your pricing, and once this is over in the next 6 months, our product will remain one of the best ones out there, because it was. So long story short, in that time frame, we had 0 sales. I was laying off people, and one of the guys I kept on staff was our VP of sales, who I hired away from Nike. And he came in and says, hey, we have an order for $1.5 million to go overseas. And I said, well, check it out, make sure we get a check, and the check clears the bank, and then if everything checks out, go ahead and do it. So he did it, and what it turned out to be was Costco, using a tactic called diverting, ordered the product through an offshore distributor. So we thought this was going over to Europe, and literally it was brought back into the United States, and the product ended up in Costco at $100 less than it was being sold in the department stores. So you can imagine the phone calls I started getting. You're a lying sack of this, and you son of a bitch, I can't believe you said you, and literally, it created just a horrible moment of decision. And my attorney, my accountant, my brother who was my partner said, hey, the retailers are the one that got us in this problem. We're not going to go out and bail them out now. Just let them deal with it as best they can. And I said, well, I can't do that because I gave them my word. I said we wouldn't dump products out in the marketplace and undercut their pricing. So literally, I called up the buyer at Costco and I said, look, your product got diverted back in. I want to buy it back. And she says, sure, you can buy it back. If you want it, you need to come in the store and buy it at retail. So, true story, any place we had a department store that had a Costco in the neighborhood, we went back and bought the juicers at retail so they wouldn't compete with the department stores. And because I had given them my word, and I told everybody in my organization, if I'm going to walk out of here with nothing, I'm going to walk out with my integrity. If we lose it all, I'm going to make sure that I stand up to what I said I was going to do. And it went against what everybody else in the business wanted to do. And here's kind of the moral and the lesson of the story is what's right is right no matter who's against it, and what's wrong is wrong no matter who's for it. And I mean, it rings out so true today, whether it's in politics or even in baseball, where people take the short view, where people bend the rules to fit what they want to get done and accomplish. And literally, that's not what we're called to be and do as Christian men. And there's a verse in the Bible in 1 Timothy 2:7 that says, God did not give us a spirit of timidity, but rather of power, love, and of self-discipline. And I tell you what, it isn't easy standing up and doing what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it. But the secret is to predetermine how you're going to respond to a situation before the situation comes up. Whether that situation is turning on the computer and looking at a site you shouldn't look at, whether it's drinking, whether it's doing drugs, whatever it is that tempts you, if you don't predetermine how you're going to handle that situation before it comes up in your life, you're destined to fall and succumb and get sucked into the vortex of the moment. And one of the phrases we used to tell our kids growing up went like this, and because it's a room full of guys, one boy, one brain, two boys, half a brain, you add alcohol and there's no brains at all. So, again, when you get together with a bunch of guys and a group of guys, this is all about camaraderie, it's about accountability, it's about surrounding yourself with guys that are going to lift you up and pull you closer to the person you're trying to become and not pull you down in those situations. So, literally, you're going to be the sum total of the people that you surround yourself with, so choose wisely.
Thanks, Steve. So, Steve, I hope when you guys went and bought all those juicers back that you had the executive membership. So it wasn't that big of a loss, right?
We actually bought back $1.3 million worth of juicers.
Wow.
Standing on principle. And my company was facing bankruptcy. We eventually came out of it. We were bought by a company out of Chicago called Salt and Maxim Housewares, and then they asked us to come and market a product called the George Foreman Grill.
That's good.
It all worked out.
If you spent 5 years in college like me, you've heard of the George Foreman Grill. All right, so over to Connor, kind of shifting over. So a few years ago, as you mentioned, you were having a great time in sales, and you ended up shifting really whole careers and moving into a job or a company that your father had started and you guys had rebranded that. Will you walk us through some of the things that you learned and faced during that time and really what you came out of identifying what you had done at the end?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll start with the decision. I think that I overthought the decision to switch. I was in this job with this company, like I said, Unum, and I got so comfortable there that I didn't know if I had the ability to leave. So I spent a lot of time in prayer, cliche answer, I spent a lot of time in prayer figuring out whether or not it was worth me leaving and going and working with my dad. And so, I'd love to sit up here and tell you that, through this prayer and this petition with God that, like the sky cracked and lightning came down and an angel, shows up and he's like, you're going to be a mortgage guy. Wasn't the case. But it really took me kind of analyzing both jobs and just being like, okay, I think that going and working with my dad and having an entrepreneurship sort of spirit would help me with my next role. So it kind of led me to really assess, like, where am I right now? Am I happy right now? No. Do I want to do something else? Yes, because I feel like it's going to prepare me for my next opportunity after doing the mortgage thing, which kind of leads me to my next point with kind of the hurdle you were talking about with doing it. And I think that what I really struggled with was purpose. And so I want to ask you guys, is anybody right now in a job that you are 100% totally fulfilled in, you love it, you're stuck there forever, you're making a killing, and you absolutely could not imagine leaving? Okay, I want to check and see y'all are hiring or not. But so very few of you guys, right? So which means that a lot of you guys probably felt a lot like me. When I was in my job at Unum, I found myself struggling to find that purpose. And the truth of the matter is, and what I kind of realized after I made the switch to working with my dad, is that purpose is this very weighty thing in your life that work just can't satisfy. Your job and the things that you do for work are not going to be able to fulfill your purpose. I explained it to a buddy recently about purpose is like this big bucket, and it's almost like our jobs are like a drop of water trying to fill the whole thing up. We're not going to fill the whole bucket up with one drop of water, the job. And so what I kind of came to realize in going through church, and I don't know if anybody here goes to Passion, but Louis Giglo says it best. He says your purpose is actually to know God and to make God known. So that's the only thing that I can even imagine that would fulfill my life with purpose. So it took me a while took a lot of anxiety and a lot of figuring out in my last job to realize that what the job I'm doing right this minute here at Unum is preparing me for my next opportunity right now. So I might as well bust my ass and do the best I possibly can in this job because it's going to lead me to my next one. And sure enough, the Lord's been totally faithful. I learned a lot about sales. I learned a lot about, confronting people and doing this kind of stuff. Which has really, really helped me in my job with my dad, kind of growing our company. So, two-part answer, but that's what I'd say.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we've got some time left over for Q&A from the crowd. So we've only got enough time for 1 or 2 questions for each guy. But let's go ahead and open it up to anybody that's got questions for one of these gents. Bobby.
It's not the right order. Connor, you're how old? 28?
27.
27.
Yep.
Joel and Steve.
60.
One piece of advice.
Oh, sorry.
One piece of advice to your 27-year-old selves.
It's good.
Oh, thanks, Joel. Appreciate it. Just to allude to a point you made, everything you experience in life prepares you for what comes next.
Yeah.
And I think you said it really, really well, and this would be my advice. Be the best right where you are, doing whatever you're doing, and don't try to be somebody else. You need to be yourself because everybody else is already taken. And I just think in today's world with technology and everything else, everybody sees what everybody else is doing and thinks they have the world by the cojones, and literally you have such a really good perspective at your age that this is a stepping stone preparing you for what's going to come next. It's like, Joel worked for me coming out of college, and I drove him to drinking, so he started Monday night. But he didn't know that back then, but he had to go through that process to get there. But seriously, it's like wherever you are right now, if you're not fulfilled doing what you're doing, some people find it in their 20s, some in their 30s, some in their 40s. It takes some people a lifetime to figure out, why God put them here. But what I would recommend is just be the best version of yourself that you can be right where you are. And as you do that and become the person that God wants you to be, you'll start to see things happen and start to attract the opportunities to you that you want to pursue.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I probably the other thing I'd add on to that is just ties in with what Steve said earlier, the people you have around you. Our brewery actually started because 15 years ago, me and a group of guys were starting a Bible study, and it met Friday mornings at 6 a.m. and we were actually studying about the theology of work, which is kind of crazy. And we didn't know each other that well, and so started brewing on Mondays as a way to kind of build relationships with each other. And so many of those relationships, I feel like I've had people in my life over all of that have been those voices of truth and honesty in your life and vulnerability, and those are so key to have.
So for those who couldn't hear, the question was, how do you be intentional about your faith with all the other distractions that we have today going on with our lives? I think Joel would be a perfect advocate for that with his 17 distractions that he has at home.
My life is very, very, very chaotic. There's a really good book read recently. It's called The Common Rule. I've started practicing a lot of stuff, and the guy's got basically his thesis is that that monastic life was built on this idea of these rhythms, and that they were rules. These rules or rhythms were actually things that help tune your heart and your behavior towards what is right and what is good. And so he's got kind of these four daily rhythms and 4 weekly rhythms for people in our time and in our day. And one of them that he does that's super simple is he's like, hey, when you wake up in the morning, don't look at your phone as the first thing. He's like, take time to be on your knees, to be silent, to pray, to read some scripture. And it is shocking how even just a simple thing like that completely tunes you towards what is good and what is right. He talks about media consumption, consume things, stories that bring you towards truth and purpose and all that. I don't. And then for me, the one other thing I do. So I grew up in Japan, and I one of my favorite things growing up there was the Japanese hot baths that you go to, these public Japanese hot naked baths. Anyone's been to Japan? They're amazing. And so me and my brothers, and my dad, we would go to these. And I just had all these memories of you can't bring a phone when you're in the public naked Japanese bath. But I actually, when we recently we added a little one on the sort of back outside of our house, a heated Japanese bath, and almost 5 nights a week I go out there with my 5 boys. They're all naked, sometimes naked, and we just sit for 20 or 30 minutes and just sort of talk about life and the day and the challenges in it. And there's nothing. There's no other distractions. There's just sitting there in hot water, and there's sometimes some naked wrestling that happens. And but that's kind of one of our rhythms of a time when we just sort of completely disconnect from everything else. And my wife thought it was a crazy idea, but now she thinks it's brilliant.
Joel, for being from Japan, you don't love Japanese at all.
I moved there when I was 4, so
Got it.
I'm still here.
All right, we've got time for a few more questions. Yes, sir.
So, Steve, I believe you mentioned that you're a business partner with your brother. So, I know it's oftentimes hard to mix business and family. So, how were you able to successfully navigate a business partner relationship with your brother, maybe from the beginning, and how did that kind of evolve throughout your partnership, kind of through the end of selling your business?
Wow.
Good luck.
Yeah, really.
What was
Well, during that time,
During
when this was going on with Costco, my brother, who was married, he came to an event like this called Pro Athletes Outreach, and he and his wife accepted Christ at the event. She was 8 months pregnant, and I got a call one night in that same time frame when we were going through this Costco fiasco, and my brother was having an affair with a woman in our business. I always describe myself as, you ever see the guy in the circus that walks behind the elephant and cleans the crap up? That's kind of like what I was like with my brother. So it was, I love my brother dearly. We've attempted to be back in business 2 other times. And, it's that old fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. Sometimes if somebody isn't willing to play by the same rules and adhere to the same values, whether they're family or not, you have to make a tough decision. And literally my hand was forced there to do that. And when I say tough decision, again, there's no difference to me when you start looking at the people in your life. If they're family and they're pulling you down because of toxic personalities, because of selfish behaviors, that it needs to be dealt with. And again, there's different ways to deal with it. But that was one of the toughest things. And families in business are I think some of the most difficult business relationships to have. It was good when it was working, but it went south pretty quick, and I was the one left, holding everything. And the guy who, stood for the principles and the values, and everybody was like, what kind of company is this when you're saying one thing and your brother's doing the other? So, again, it comes back down to the same thing is you got to decide who you are and whose you are and what you stand for, and regardless of what everybody else is telling you to do or doing around you, it doesn't change you because you're responding based on your value system, not getting sucked into the vortex of somebody else's. And I think nowadays, the way our world is, the way technology is, it's so important to really know who you are. And part of that also is taking that time in the morning, taking that time to reflect, taking that time to really understand and connect with God and asking for the wisdom. I just had that conversation with somebody today about a business meeting I had yesterday about praying for God to give me the wisdom on, number one, should I do this deal? And number two, if I do it, how should I structure it? And literally it came to me when I was working out at 6 o'clock this morning, called the guy at 2 o'clock this afternoon, and we're meeting again tomorrow to talk about it. So again, I was a ready, fire, aim type of guy that if I wanted to do it, I did it my way and didn't really consider what God wanted to do. And as I've gotten older, of really, again, going back to kind of Joel's rhythms, understand that God's way is uniquely different, but his way and his plan are always better than anything I can come up with on my own. So I've learned to get out of his way and surrender as much as I possibly can.
Yeah.
Good question.
Well said. And Steve has been a real positive influence in my life for the past probably 10 years since his wife invited me to Ironman, the men's group he had mentioned earlier, not his son, my friend, or not himself, but
You wouldn't
Indy.
have come if I invited him.
That's probably true. All right, so we got time for a few more questions. Matt.
Yeah. Hey, my question's for Connor. From knowing you, I know faith's a big part of your story. Do you share that with your buddies, and if so, how do you go about doing that?
Share my faith with my buddies.
Yeah, your friends.
So, the short answer is yes. I do share my faith with my buddies. I feel like I've been pretty intentional in my life about honestly trying to surround myself with guys that I can do life with that are going to build me up. The old saying of the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? So I'm trying to make those 5 people faith-based guys that will push me in my faith. As far as getting other people kind of in on the faith, I maybe have a little bit of a unique perspective on that. My perspective is love first, ask second about church. We're not going to dive into theology tonight about what's right and what's not right, but I just have this philosophy that if someone is unchurched, If someone doesn't, is kind of questioning the faith, wants to figure it out, it's way better to build a relationship and a connection with them on the front end, and then ask them, hey man, I'm doing this really cool thing, love you to come. And I mean, it's not massively successful. I'm not, churning out Christians or anything, but it's changed the lives of some of my close friends, which is a good question.
And Connor, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say one other thing. Somebody texted me this a couple of months ago, and it said, Christ didn't die on the cross so we could go to church. Christ died on the cross so we could become the church.
Yeah.
And literally, we might be the only church that people see. And what Connor said about leading with love is needed more today than it ever has been before, regardless of race or sexual origin or whatever the issue is. The world is made up of different people, and God loves them all.
Yeah.
And that's something else. Yeah, I've kind of tempered my judgment, and if we could all learn to lead with love at home, at work, and in the community, the world would be such a different place. And it's easy to say, but hard to do.
That's right. Yeah, and to build on that, I don't know how many of you guys know this, but there was a guy that took his own life yesterday that was a part of our community. He grew up in Buckhead, went to one of the Buckhead school churches, went to UGA, or excuse me, schools, went to UGA and worked with probably a handful of guys that are in this room. And it's really kind of impacted all of us up on stage, and then the rest of the guys at Purpose on Tap in the past few days on, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And if you don't have a community, if you don't have guys, they're going to call you out on your bullshit. If you don't have that, it's just kind of setting yourself up for failure. And so I just strongly encourage all of you guys to create community, to find other guys you're able to share stuff with, vent to them, whether it's about personal struggles, whether it's about your marriage, stuff at work. All that's really important. And so one of the big things we really want to emphasize at Purpose on Tap is just encouraging and creating community. So we've heard from a wide variety of fantastic gentlemen this evening, but if you take away anything tonight, know that you've got a group of guys here, you've got a group of guys around you, and if you're struggling with anything, just talk to somebody first. Before you do anything, just talk to somebody, because there's plenty of guys that are here that love you, and they're ready to listen to you. And so we just encourage y'all to do that. Thanks for coming. So we'll meet again in a few weeks. And thanks again for y'all's time. Thanks for coming.
That was awesome. Yeah, good stuff.